You are walking down the cobblestone streets of Montparnasse in 1925, and the air itself seems to pulse with creative energy. Jazz melodies drift from basement clubs, mixing with the scent of oil paints and turpentine, coffee, and fresh bread. Something magnificent is transforming the artistic quarter of Paris into a paradise of creativity and innovation. You see a woman in a flowing dress, her eyes bright with determination, laughing joyfully as she discusses her latest painting with fellow artists gathered around easels in the morning light. She is talented, she is free, and she is part of a revolution that would reshape art forever. What you are witnessing is one of history's most inspiring chapters, where women artists finally found their voices and claimed their place in the world of fine arts. This is not just another story about the Roaring Twenties. This is the remarkable story of how creative women in the 1920s Paris transformed themselves from society's margins into the very heart of artistic innovation, becoming painters, sculptors, writers, and visionaries who would influence generations to come. Here is what makes this story absolutely extraordinary. These were not just random individuals pursuing hobbies. These were some of the most talented, determined, and revolutionary women of their time. Women who had broken free from Victorian constraints, who were redefining what it meant to be female in the modern world. The very freedom they had fought so hard to achieve became the foundation upon which they built their artistic legacies. You are about to discover why 1920s Paris became ground zero for what historians now call the first great flowering of women's artistic independence, and how the women who thought they were simply following their dreams were actually creating a movement that would define the bright side of the jazz age forever. Let me paint you a picture of what Paris looked like in 1924. Because understanding this world is crucial to understanding how women could finally take their place as serious artists. The Great War had ended just 6 years earlier, leaving behind a generation that had witnessed tremendous change. The old world was transformed, and in its place emerged something entirely new, something that questioned every traditional assumption their parents had held sacred. Paris in the 20s was not just a city. It was a magnet for every creative soul who wanted to escape the limiting conventions of their homeland. American women fled prohibition and restrictive social expectations. British women escaped the rigid class system. Russian immigrants brought their own brand of artistic intensity after fleeing revolution. And French women discovered that they could finally live as artists had always lived, with freedom, passion, and creative authenticity. The bohemian quarters of Montparnasse and Montmartre had become incredible melting pots where nationality, class, and gender seemed almost irrelevant. What mattered was your art, your vision, your willingness to pursue creative truth. Women could exhibit in galleries. They could support themselves through their creativity. They could be taken seriously as professional artists rather than mere hobbyists. It was liberating in the most profound sense. But here is where the story becomes truly remarkable. In this world where boundaries were constantly being expanded, where experimentation was not just accepted but celebrated, women were not just participants in the artistic revolution. They were leading it. Take someone like Marie-Claire Dubois, born Marie Lefebvre, who became one of the most celebrated photographers of the era. Her real name, of course, was not what she used professionally. Most of these women had reinvented themselves completely, choosing artistic names that reflected their new identities as serious creators rather than society daughters. Marie-Claire embodied everything the artistic movement represented. She was fearless, professionally ambitious, technically skilled, and completely dedicated to her craft. Marie-Claire captured some of the most iconic images of the time, working with galleries across Europe and establishing her own studio in the heart of Montparnasse. She created portraits that revealed the inner lives of her subjects. She documented the changing face of modern Paris. She pioneered new techniques that influenced photography for decades to come. She lived exactly the kind of life that previous generations of women could only dream about. The artistic culture of creative. Paris was incredibly collaborative. Women did not work in isolation. They formed supportive communities in artist studios and inspiring salons in the company of writers, painters, and musicians who were all convinced they were participating in something profound and meaningful. There were entire social networks built around creative exchange, elaborate gatherings that made the experience feel purposeful and sophisticated rather than merely commercial. Picture a typical evening in one of these studios. The walls are covered with completed paintings, sculptures in various stages of creation. There is a gramophone playing classical music or jazz records, bottles of wine and coffee scattered around, and a group of the most interesting people in Paris engaged in intense conversations about art, philosophy, and the meaning of creative expression. Someone unveils their latest work, and suddenly the evening takes on an entirely different quality of shared discovery and mutual inspiration. What these women experienced was the immediate joy of creative community. Their art schools were more supportive than they had ever been before. The instruction was rigorous, the standards high, and for many students, the environment was one where they could work for hours without interruption, where their creative voices were encouraged, where they could access parts of their artistic vision that had previously been suppressed by social expectations. Their art did not immediately change their lives in dramatic ways. Instead, it seemed to fulfill them. Women found they could work with sustained concentration, that their confidence grew steadily, that they could express ideas and emotions that conventional society had never allowed them to explore publicly. For artists who were already living independently, who were already challenging social boundaries in every other aspect of their lives, serious creative work felt like the natural culmination of their journey toward complete personal authenticity. But the artistic community in Paris was not isolated from the larger world of professional opportunity. And that larger world was becoming increasingly receptive to women's creative contributions. The aftermath of World War I had created new markets for art, and Paris had become a major center for international cultural exchange between Europe and the Americas. The artwork that was emerging from women's studios was not always the conventional pretty pictures that society had previously expected from female artists. Many women began exploring bold new styles, experimenting with cubism, expressionism, and other avant-garde movements. What started as traditional training in realistic techniques gradually evolved into groundbreaking experimentation with color, form, and subject matter. The social dynamics of artistic creation also fostered tremendous innovation. In a community where creative credibility was everything, artistic excellence became a kind of currency. Women who produced mediocre work were encouraged to develop their skills rather than being dismissed. There was enormous support for pushing boundaries, for taking risks that conventional society might have discouraged. Here is something that makes this story even more inspiring. Many of these women were supporting themselves through their art for the first time in history. They were finally economically independent, finally free to make their own choices about their careers, their artistic development, their professional relationships. The very freedom they had fought so hard to achieve became the foundation for unprecedented creative achievement. The dealers and collectors who worked with the artistic community understood their market perfectly. They were not dealing with dilettantes or hobbyists. They were working with serious professional artists who saw themselves as pioneers of modern creative expression. The business relationships were conducted with mutual respect and professional standards. The galleries that featured women's work presented it as cutting-edge contemporary art rather than merely curiosities or decorative pieces. What these women understood was that artistic excellence speaks for itself, regardless of the artist's gender. The same dedication to craft that made them serious artists made them valuable contributors to the cultural dialogue of their time. The same commitment to innovation that had freed them from conventional social constraints made them natural leaders in artistic movements that were reshaping European culture. The same independent spirit that had brought them to Paris made them ideal collaborators in creative endeavors that required both individual vision and cooperative effort. As 1925 progressed, the signs of this artistic renaissance began to flourish throughout Paris. Women who had arrived as students or unknown artists began receiving recognition, completing important commissions, establishing reputations that extended far beyond their immediate circle. Their work, when galleries chose to exhibit it, began showing the effects of serious training and sustained practice. Some artists had developed highly personal styles that were immediately recognizable. Others became master technicians whose skill was evident in every brushstroke or carved detail. But perhaps most remarkable of all, the community that had once been skeptical about women's artistic abilities began to recognize and celebrate their contributions. The same artistic society that had initially questioned their commitment now saw their creative work as essential to the cultural vitality of Paris. The transformation was not immediate, but it was unmistakable. By 1926, what had started as individual efforts to pursue artistic careers had evolved into something far more significant. The women who had once gathered in studios to share techniques and encouragement were now meeting as established professionals, successful artists who were shaping the direction of contemporary art. Camille Rousseau, who operated one of the most influential galleries in Montparnasse, began noticing the change in her exhibitions. Women who had once hesitated to submit their work for consideration now arrived confidently, eager to discuss their artistic development and their plans for future projects. The quiet determination that had brought them to Paris was now expressed through bold, accomplished artwork that demanded serious attention. What makes this period so inspiring is how these women managed to maintain their artistic integrity while achieving commercial success. They would attend gallery openings as featured artists rather than merely observers. They would participate in artistic movements as leaders rather than followers. They presented themselves as the serious, professional creators they had worked so hard to become. The physical transformation was equally remarkable. Regular work in well-lit studios, proper nutrition, and the satisfaction of creative fulfillment gave these women a vitality and confidence that was immediately apparent. Though in the fashion-conscious world of 1920s Paris, this healthy glow was certainly seen as attractive and enviable. Their skin took on the subtle patina that comes from spending time outdoors painting landscapes or in bright studios working on portraits. Their eyes became bright with the satisfaction that comes from meaningful work. These changes happened gradually enough that friends and admirers could see the positive effects of a life dedicated to serious artistic pursuit. More inspiring were the personality developments. Women who had been uncertain about their creative abilities became increasingly confident and articulate about their artistic vision. Isabelle Moreau, a sculptor who had started as one of the quieter members of the Montparnasse community, began creating ambitious large-scale works that reflected her growing mastery of her medium. When gallery owners began featuring her sculptures prominently, she understood was because they recognized genuine artistic merit in her work rather than merely supporting a novelty. The economics of artistic success created their own positive momentum. Quality art commanded good prices, and as skills developed, these women needed to produce fewer pieces to maintain their income. Women who had initially worried about financial security began selling their work to collectors across Europe, establishing international reputations that provided both income and artistic validation. The very economic independence that had been so central to their decision to pursue art seriously became the foundation for even greater creative freedom as success allowed them to take on more ambitious projects and experiment with new techniques. The supportive nature of artistic collaboration in this community was perhaps the most beautiful aspect of the entire movement. The bohemian world of 1920s Paris was built on the idea that creative expression flourished when artists supported each other's development rather than competing destructively. When established artists offered guidance and encouragement to newer community members, they were celebrated for fostering artistic growth rather than criticized for abandoning competitive principles. This created a situation where women could develop their skills rapidly while building lasting professional relationships with other artists who understood their commitment to serious creative work. The international nature of the Montparnasse community made the artistic development even more rich and varied. Many of these women were learning from artists who had trained in different cultural traditions, sharing techniques and perspectives that had never been combined before. They were surrounded by other creative professionals who were all committed to pushing the boundaries of what art could accomplish. There was every reason to strive for excellence because excellence was recognized, celebrated, and financially rewarded. By 1927, the artistic renaissance had begun affecting entire creative circles. Whole groups of artists, writers, and performers who had once been struggling to establish themselves were now achieving recognition for innovative, accomplished work. The cafes and studios that had been centers of hopeful experimentation became gathering places for people united by their shared success and commitment to continued artistic growth. The collectors and dealers who worked with this community had become increasingly sophisticated in their understanding of contemporary art. They recognized that the women artists they represented were not pursuing art as a temporary diversion, but as lifelong professional commitments that deserved serious investment and promotion. Instead of street corner vendors, they operated through networks of established galleries and cultural institutions that could provide artists with the professional support and marketing expertise that serious careers required. They presented new work not as curiosities, but as significant contributions to contemporary cultural dialogue. Some dealers developed close working relationships with specific artists, providing not just sales opportunities, but also introductions to collectors, critics, and other professionals who can advance their careers. This created situations where talented women became part of supportive professional networks rather than isolated individuals trying to succeed entirely on their own. A painter might work with a gallery that specialized in her particular style, benefiting from the dealer's expertise in marketing similar work and connecting with collectors who appreciated her artistic approach. The medical understanding of creative work in the 20s emphasized the positive effects of meaningful occupation and artistic expression. Doctors often recommended creative pursuits as beneficial for both physical and mental health, and treatment approaches focused on supporting healthy lifestyle choices rather than restricting them. Women who dedicated themselves to serious artistic work often found that the regular schedule, physical activity, and intellectual stimulation associated with their careers improved their overall well-being significantly. They might seek medical attention for the minor injuries that occasionally came with studio work, or for advice about maintaining their health during intensive creative periods. But they rarely needed to hide their professional activities from healthcare providers. As the artistic community matured, a wonderful phenomenon emerged within the creative circles. Some women began to mentor younger artists, sharing both technical knowledge and practical wisdom about building sustainable creative careers. They understood that their success was meaningful not just personally, but as proof that women could excel in professional artistic fields that had previously excluded them. This mentorship created positive cycles where established artists helped newcomers developed their skills more quickly while building professional networks that supported continued innovation. The literature and art produced during this period reflects the joy and confidence that came from finally having the freedom to create without apology. Works from this era show technical excellence combined with bold experimentation, suggesting artists who had both the skills and the confidence necessary to take creative risks. The beauty of this period is that we can see exactly what these talented women accomplished when they were given the opportunity to work freely and seriously. Their legacy includes paintings, sculptures, photographs, and writings that continue to influence artists today. The social dynamics within the artistic community also strengthened as the movement gained momentum. Relationships became increasingly based on mutual respect for each other's professional accomplishments rather than simply social compatibility. Women who had once formed tentative friendships based on shared hopes began developing lasting professional collaborations based on recognized talent and complementary skills. The community that had been built on mutual encouragement became strengthened by mutual success and continued commitment to artistic excellence. Love affairs, which had always been part of bohemian life, now developed between people who respected each other as professional equals rather than viewing romance as either escape from or consolation for frustrated ambitions. Partners encouraged each other's artistic development and celebrated each other's professional achievements. Some relationships deepened because both people were pursuing parallel successful careers that provided both personal satisfaction and financial security. The impact on artistic output was remarkable and positive. Most women became significantly more productive as their skills developed and their confidence grew. Their motivation and energy, supported by professional success and creative satisfaction, led to sustained periods of high-quality work. Others developed consistent creative practices that allowed them to balance innovation with technical excellence, producing bodies of work that showed clear artistic development over time. A few managed to achieve recognition as leaders in their fields, their work setting standards that influenced other artists and shaped contemporary aesthetic discussions. What makes studying this period so rewarding is that many of the women involved left detailed records of their experiences through letters, diaries, and autobiographical writings. These documents provide insight into the daily realities of building artistic careers and the satisfaction that came from finally being able to pursue their creative vision seriously. We have extensive correspondence where successful artists describe their working methods, their relationships with dealers and collectors, and their hopes for future projects. Photography from this period provides some of the most inspiring documentation of the artistic community's vitality. Early photos show determined young women arriving in Paris with portfolios and dreams. Photos from just a few years later show the same women transformed by success and creative fulfillment, surrounded by their artwork, engaged in animated professional discussions, their faces reflecting the confidence that comes from meaningful achievement. What's particularly inspiring about this entire period is how sustainable much of it proved to be. The artistic renaissance that flourished in 1920s Paris was not a temporary phenomenon, but the foundation for lasting careers and continuing cultural influence. The women who established themselves during this period were not victims of circumstances beyond their control. They were pioneers who created opportunities through talent, determination, and mutual support, demonstrating that when social barriers are removed, creative excellence flourishes. The bohemian ideal of artistic freedom, which had attracted these women from around the world, proved to be a sustainable foundation for both personal satisfaction and professional achievement. With supportive communities, access to training and exhibition opportunities, and recognition that individual creativity could contribute to collective cultural advancement, The freedom that had seemed so liberating became the basis for lasting artistic careers. As 1928 approached, the artistic renaissance had begun to influence cultural institutions far beyond Paris. Museums and galleries in other major cities were seeking work by artists who had emerged from the Montparnasse community, recognizing that important artistic developments were happening there and wanting to introduce these innovations to their own audiences. What had started as individual decisions to pursue artistic careers had evolved into something much more significant, a demonstration that when women were given equal opportunities and social support, they could contribute as significantly to cultural development as any other group of artists. The women at the center of this renaissance had become symbols of successful creative independence, their individual achievements contributing to larger conversations about talent, opportunity, and the relationship between personal freedom and artistic excellence. Their voices were increasingly prominent in discussions about contemporary art, as galleries and critics recognized their work as essential to understanding the creative innovations that were reshaping European culture. The artistic dream that had drawn so many talented women to Paris was flourishing, supported by communities that valued excellence over convention and sustained by economic and social systems that made serious creative careers possible. For the first time in history, the dealers who had recognized the potential of women artists early in the period understood something that society was gradually learning: that artistic talent develops best in supportive environments where creativity is valued and excellence is rewarded, regardless of traditional social categories. By 1928, what had started as individual experiments in creative independence had become a collective demonstration of women's artistic capabilities. These were not artists who succeeded despite being women, but artists whose work was enhanced by the unique perspectives and experiences that their backgrounds provided. The cognitive effects of serious creative work were entirely positive. Women who dedicated themselves to developing their artistic skills found that the discipline required for technical mastery enhanced their ability to think clearly and express themselves effectively. Professional creative work provided exactly the kind of intellectual stimulation and structured challenge that promoted mental acuity rather than impairing it. The very focus and dedication that made these women successful artists also made them more capable in other areas of their lives. What emerges from studying this period is a picture of intelligent, creative women who made thoughtful decisions about their careers and were rewarded for their dedication and skill. They could articulate exactly what artistic excellence required and were willing to commit the time and energy necessary to achieve it. They would complete ambitious projects and go on to undertake even more challenging work, building bodies of artistic achievement that demonstrated sustained creative development rather than temporary inspiration. The role of women in the art world itself provides another inspiring aspect of this story. Some successful women became gallery owners and dealers themselves, either to support their own artistic careers or because their experience in the artistic community gave them valuable insight into what collectors and critics were seeking. This created situations where women were simultaneously creating and promoting excellent art, using their understanding of both artistic creation and professional marketing to build sustainable careers that benefited entire artistic communities. Female gallery owners often had access to networks and artistic circles that male dealers found difficult to penetrate. They could develop relationships with emerging artists based on shared experience and mutual understanding, rather than purely commercial considerations. They could use their own artistic credibility to present new work as serious, contemporary art rather than merely commercial commodities. But women who became involved in the business side of art often found themselves in positions of considerable influence and respect within the professional art world. They became important figures for collectors, critics, and institutions who recognized their expertise and relied on their judgment in identifying significant new artistic developments. They also became role models for other women, demonstrating that success in art-related fields was possible and sustainable. The international nature of the artistic community meant that the Renaissance in Paris had positive effects around the world. Women who had established themselves in Paris often returned to their home countries as recognized artists, bringing both their individual achievements and their experience of collaborative creative communities with them. American families would receive letters from daughters in Paris, describing their artistic achievements and professional successes, often accompanied by newspaper clippings or exhibition catalogs that documented their growing reputations. Some families hired photographers to document their daughters' artistic accomplishments, creating family archives that celebrated creative achievement alongside more traditional milestones. The reports these families received revealed the extent to which the American expatriate community had benefited from the opportunities available in Paris. Names that had appeared in society pages as promising young women now appeared in art journals and exhibition reviews as serious professional artists. The French government's response to the cultural renaissance was largely positive, recognizing that the artistic communities of Paris were significant cultural attractions that brought international attention and economic benefits to the city. The Bohemian quarters of Paris were celebrated as examples of the cultural vitality that made France an important center for contemporary artistic development. Government officials often attended gallery openings and cultural events, acknowledging the contribution that international artists were making to French cultural life. This official recognition created supportive conditions rather than restrictive ones, as authorities understood that artistic excellence enhanced France's international reputation rather than threatening social stability. The positive relationship between artists and civic institutions created an environment where creative communities could flourish with institutional support rather than despite official resistance. The artistic output from this period reflects the confidence and technical skill that developed when talented women had access to excellent training, supportive communities, and professional opportunities. The paintings, sculptures, photographs, and writings from 1920s Paris demonstrate both individual creativity and collaborative innovation. Some of the most emotionally powerful and technically accomplished art from the 20s was created by women who had found their artistic voices in the supportive environment of the Parisian creative community. Their work often showed a combination of technical excellence and creative boldness that was unprecedented in women's artistic production. Museums and private collections today contain numerous works from this period that clearly show the artistic development of their creators, starting with competent student work and evolving into sophisticated, innovative pieces that influenced contemporary artistic movements. The relationship between creative work and personal fulfillment was clearly positive during this period. Women found that serious artistic practice enhanced rather than detracted from their overall life satisfaction and their ability to form meaningful relationships with others. The technical skills that required years to develop provided lasting foundations for creative careers that continued to develop and mature over time. A painter who had mastered complex color relationships could continue to explore and refine her techniques throughout her career. A writer who had developed her distinctive voice could continue to create works of increasing depth and sophistication. These gains were permanent rather than temporary, providing foundations for lifelong creative careers rather than brief periods of inspiration. The social support systems that developed during this period were strengthened rather than weakened by the community's growing success. Friendships remained based on genuine emotional connection and shared artistic interests rather than becoming superficial or competitive. Romantic relationships often deepened as partners encouraged each other's professional development and celebrated each other's achievements. The artistic community that had provided encouragement and practical support during the early years continued to offer collaboration and inspiration as its members achieved professional recognition. Women who had supported each other through the challenges of establishing artistic careers continued to maintain those relationships as their individual successes enhanced rather than threatened their friendships. By 1929, the artistic renaissance had fundamentally enriched the character of creative Paris. The vibrant artistic community that had attracted creative women from around the world had become something even more significant. A demonstration of what was possible when talent was nurtured, excellence was rewarded, and creative freedom was combined with professional support. What had started as individual dreams of artistic achievement had become a collective movement that influenced cultural development throughout Europe and America. The promise of artistic freedom and personal fulfillment that had drawn so many talented women to Montparnasse had been fulfilled through sustained effort, mutual support, and dedication to creative excellence. The women who achieved success during this period often spoke later about the extraordinary combination of personal freedom and professional opportunity that had made their careers possible. They had experienced both the satisfaction of individual creative achievement and the joy of participating in a community of artists who shared their commitment to excellence. They had seen what was possible when women were given equal access to training, exhibition opportunities, and professional recognition. And they had demonstrated through their own success that artistic talent, when properly supported and developed, could create work of lasting cultural significance. What becomes clear from studying this period is that the artistic renaissance in 1920s Paris was not just a fortunate accident of historical circumstances. It was the result of specific social conditions that supported, rather than hindered, creative development, communities that valued excellence over convention, economic systems that rewarded artistic achievement, and cultural institutions that provided opportunities for serious professional development. The women who succeeded during this period were not extraordinary individuals who overcame impossible odds. They were talented people who were finally given the conditions necessary for their abilities to flourish: access to training, supportive communities, and recognition for achievement. Their success demonstrates the creative potential that exists when social barriers are removed and when individual talent can develop within supportive, encouraging environments. The tragedy was not that so many talented women succeeded in achieving their artistic dreams, but that it had taken so long for society to provide the conditions that made such success possible. The dealers and collectors who had recognized women's artistic potential early in the period understood something that society was gradually learning: that creative excellence emerges when talent is combined with opportunity, training, and community support. By 1928, what had started as individual decisions to pursue artistic careers had become a collective demonstration that artistic achievement depends more on access to opportunity than on traditional social categories. The women who had found their creative voices in Paris had become proof that when artificial barriers are removed, artistic talent flourishes regardless of conventional expectations about who can succeed as a serious artist. The cognitive enhancement that came from serious creative work was evident in every aspect of these women's lives. Their ability to think clearly, express themselves effectively, and solve complex problems improved as they developed their artistic skills. Professional creative work provided exactly the kind of intellectual challenge and structured practice that enhanced rather than impaired mental functioning. The focus and discipline required for artistic excellence translated into greater capability in other areas as well. What emerges from studying individual cases is a picture of women whose intellectual abilities were enhanced by their artistic practice, who became more articulate, more confident, and more capable as they developed their creative skills. They could discuss their artistic techniques with increasing sophistication while also demonstrating the practical skills necessary to manage their professional careers effectively. The gap between artistic ambition and practical achievement narrowed as skills developed and opportunities expanded. The social support systems that had helped individual women establish their careers also benefited from their collective success. As more women achieved recognition, the entire artistic community gained credibility and respect that made it easier for newer members to find acceptance and support. Friendships were strengthened rather than threatened by professional success, as shared achievement created deeper bonds between women who would support each other through the challenges of building creative careers. Romantic relationships often flourished when both partners were pursuing meaningful work that provided both personal satisfaction and professional recognition. The artistic community that had nurtured individual talent continued to benefit from the collective reputation and influence that its members had achieved through their dedication to excellence. Women who had been encouraged and supported during their early artistic development became mentors and supporters for the next generation of artists, creating sustainable cycles of mutual assistance and shared success. By 1930, the artistic renaissance had created lasting changes that extended far beyond the immediate careers of the women involved. The success of women artists in Paris had demonstrated to cultural institutions worldwide that female artistic achievement was not an anomaly, but a resource that had been systematically underutilized. Museums, galleries, schools, and critics began reconsidering their assumptions about artistic talent and started providing more opportunities for women artists in recognition of the excellence that had emerged when such opportunities were made available. The community that had nurtured this renaissance continued to attract talented women who wanted to develop their artistic abilities in an environment that had proven capable of supporting professional creative careers. What had started as a fortunate confluence of social and economic conditions had become an established cultural institution that continued to influence artistic development for generations. The artistic renaissance of 1920s Paris stands as one of history's most inspiring examples of what becomes possible when talent is recognized, excellence is rewarded, and creative communities are supported rather than restricted. The women at the center of this movement were pioneers who demonstrated that artistic achievement flourishes when individual creativity is combined with community support, professional opportunity, and social recognition. Their success created lasting changes in how society understood the relationship between gender and creative talent, opening doors for future generations of women artists. The ripple effects of what happened in Paris extended to major cultural centers around the world, creating networks of opportunity and recognition that made artistic careers more accessible to women everywhere. London's artistic community began actively recruiting women artists who had trained in Paris. Berlin's galleries started featuring work by women artists as a matter of course rather than as special exhibitions. New York's museums began collecting work by contemporary women artists, recognizing that significant artistic developments were happening and that institutional collections needed to reflect these changes. What's particularly inspiring is how sustainable these changes proved to be. The networks of support and opportunity that had developed during the 1920s continued to function effectively for decades, providing foundations for continued artistic achievement by successive generations of women. Dealers and galleries that had learned to work successfully with women artists continued to seek out and promote female talent, understanding that diversity in their artist rosters enhanced rather than limited their commercial and critical success. The international connections that had made Paris such an attractive destination for artists also facilitated the spread of opportunities and recognition to other cities, creating a worldwide network of cultural institutions that supported women's artistic careers as a matter of professional practice rather than special accommodation. American authorities celebrated the number of their citizens who had achieved international recognition as artists while living in Paris. The State Department began receiving reports from consular officials describing American women who had established successful careers in France and were contributing to positive cultural exchange between the two countries. These women had become, in effect, cultural ambassadors who enhanced America's international reputation through their artistic achievements and professional success. Some families organized celebrations when their daughters achieved recognition in European exhibitions or received commissions from prestigious collectors. These celebrations were well-documented events that attracted attention from local newspapers and cultural organizations, helping to spread awareness of the opportunities that were available for serious women artists. Many family celebrations became community events that encouraged other young women to pursue their own artistic ambitions. The medical profession's response to the Renaissance was uniformly positive, as doctors observed that women who pursued serious creative careers showed excellent physical and mental health compared to those who were restricted to conventional domestic roles. Progressive physicians began recommending artistic pursuits as beneficial for women's overall well-being, noting that creative work provided exactly the kind of intellectual stimulation and physical activity that promoted robust health. These medical endorsements helped to counter traditional arguments that artistic careers were somehow inappropriate or unhealthy for women, providing professional support for families who wanted to encourage their daughters' creative ambitions. Dr. Marie Curie, despite her focus on scientific research, became involved in supporting the artistic community after observing that several of her female colleagues have benefited significantly from maintaining creative pursuits alongside their professional work. Her public statements about the value of creative expression for intellectual women helped to legitimize artistic careers and encouraged other prominent women to speak publicly about the importance of supporting women's creative development. What emerges from Curie's advocacy is a picture of artistic work as beneficial for women's intellectual and professional development rather than as a distraction from more serious pursuits. She documented the positive effect she observed in women whose lives included serious creative practice, noting improvements in confidence, problem-solving abilities, and overall life satisfaction. The art market's response to the Renaissance revealed the commercial wisdom of recognizing and promoting excellent work, regardless of traditional prejudices about who could create it. Collectors and dealers who had invested in women's work early in the period found that their judgment had been vindicated as those artists developed international reputations, and their work increased significantly in value. Some collectors became known specifically for their ability to identify promising women artists before they achieved widespread recognition, building reputations as connoisseurs who could spot emerging talent regardless of conventional expectations. These collectors often developed long-term relationships with the artists they supported, providing not just financial backing, but also introductions to other collectors, critics, and cultural institutions that could advance the artists' careers. Gallery owners who had learned to work effectively with women artists found that their expertise made them valuable resources for collectors and institutions who wanted to acquire work by the best contemporary artists, regardless of gender. These professional relationships were based on mutual respect and shared commitment to artistic excellence rather than on novelty or social experimentation. The impact on specific artistic movements was profound and lasting, but in ways that enriched rather than disrupted cultural development. The Impressionist tradition, which had always been relatively welcoming to women artists, was revitalized by the influx of talented practitioners who brought new perspectives and techniques to established approaches. Cubism and other avant-garde movements were strengthened by the participation of women artists whose different life experiences brought fresh approaches to familiar aesthetic problems. Several women became recognized leaders in movements that had initially been dominated by male artists. Their work setting standards that influenced the direction of contemporary artistic development. The Surrealist movement was particularly enriched by women's participation, as their different psychological and social experiences provided new sources of imagery and emotional content that expanded the movement's range and influence. Data movement celebrations of diversity and rejection of conventional categories made it a natural home for women artists who were challenging traditional assumptions about creative roles. Several prominent female datists became important figures in the movement's evolution, their work contributing to its development in ways that were essential rather than merely supplemental. The fashion industry, which had always had close connections to the artistic community, began celebrating the sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities that had developed among professional women artists at the elegance and creativity that characterized. Successful artists influenced fashion trends in positive directions, promoting styles that emphasized intelligence, capability, and creative sophistication rather than merely conventional attractiveness. Fashion magazines began featuring profiles of successful women artists, presenting them as role models whose careers demonstrated the possibilities available to ambitious, talented women. This cultural representation helped to normalize the idea of women as serious professionals in creative fields, making artistic careers seem more accessible and socially acceptable to young women who might have previously considered such ambitions impractical or inappropriate. The publishing industry embraced the Renaissance enthusiastically, as editors and publishers found that work by women artists and writers often brought fresh perspectives and technical innovations that enhanced the quality and commercial appeal of their publications. Literary magazines began actively seeking work by women writers, recognizing that their different experiences and viewpoints enriched contemporary cultural dialogue. Publishers discovered that books by women artists often found enthusiastic audiences among both critics and general readers, leading to increased opportunities for women writers and more diverse publishing lists that reflected the full range of contemporary creative achievement. Book reviewers developed more sophisticated frameworks for evaluating work by women artists, focusing on technical excellence and artistic innovation rather than treating female authorship as either a curiosity or a social statement. This critical development meant that women's work was more likely to receive serious, thoughtful evaluation that helped readers understand its artistic merit and cultural significance. The educational establishment responded to the Renaissance by expanding opportunities for women in art schools and university programs, recognizing that excellent female students enhanced rather than threatened the quality of artistic education. The École des Beaux-Arts and other prestigious institutions began actively recruiting talented women students and providing them with the same rigorous training and professional preparation that had previously been reserved for male students. Faculty members found that classes with diverse student populations often generated more innovative ideas and produced work of higher overall quality than more homogeneous groups. Some professors began developing new pedagogical approaches that took advantage of the different perspectives and experiences that women students brought to traditional artistic problems. These educational innovations often benefited all students by encouraging more creative and flexible approaches to artistic development. Private art instructors found that teaching women students was often particularly rewarding because many had developed strong motivation and clear artistic goals before beginning formal training. The combination of talent, determination, and focused ambition often made female students ideal candidates for advanced artistic education. The impact on families was transformative and far-reaching, extending well beyond the immediate relatives of successful women artists. Parents, siblings, and extended family members found themselves celebrating achievements they had never imagined possible for the women in their lives. The pride and satisfaction that came from Watching daughters succeed as professional artists created new models for what women could accomplish when given proper support and opportunity. Many families found that supporting their daughters' artistic ambitions had been one of the most rewarding investments they had ever made, both emotionally and often financially, as successful artists were able to contribute significantly to family resources while pursuing work that brought them deep personal satisfaction. The correspondence between family members during this period reveals the joy and pride that artistic success created. Parents would write enthusiastic letters to each other, describing their daughters' latest exhibitions or commissions. Siblings expressed admiration for their sisters' professional achievements and often sought advice about their own career decisions. Some families organized elaborate celebrations when their daughters achieved significant recognition, creating events that brought together extended families and communities to honor artistic achievement. These celebrations often became models for other families, demonstrating that creative success deserved the same recognition and support as achievement in more traditional fields. The long-term positive impact on family relationships was profound and lasting. Parents who had initially worried about their daughters' unconventional career choices often became their most enthusiastic supporters and promoters. Siblings developed deeper appreciation for creativity and often pursued their own artistic interests as a result of witnessing their sister's success. The economic contributions that successful artists made to their families often provided practical validation for choices that had initially seemed risky or impractical. Some women were able to support not only themselves but also help with their siblings' education or their parents' financial security through the income from their artistic careers. The medical expenses associated with maintaining good health while pursuing demanding creative careers were generally manageable and often less than the costs associated with the stress-related illnesses that frequently affected women who were restricted to unsatisfying conventional roles. Treatment options for the minor injuries or health issues that occasionally arose from studio work were readily available and effective. Insurance coverage for professional artists was beginning to become available as the field gained recognition as a legitimate career path. Some families found that their daughters' artistic success actually improved their access to quality medical care, as established artists often had better resources and professional connections than women in more traditional occupations. Some families formed networks with other parents whose daughters were pursuing artistic careers, sharing information about opportunities and celebrating each other's successes. These informal support groups provided emotional encouragement for parents who were navigating unfamiliar territory and practical advice about how to best support their daughters' professional development. The long-term psychological benefits for family members were significant and lasting. Parents often reported that supporting their daughters' artistic ambitions had taught them important lessons about creativity, determination, and the value of pursuing meaningful work. Siblings frequently credited their sisters' example with inspiring them to pursue their own ambitions more boldly. The success of women artists created generational changes in family attitudes toward creativity, education, and women's capabilities that influenced how subsequent generations approach career decisions and personal development. Mental health outcomes for families were generally excellent, as the satisfaction of supporting successful artistic careers provided a sense of purpose and accomplishment that enhanced overall family well-being. As the 1920s drew to a close, the full scope of the artistic renaissance's positive impact was becoming undeniably clear. What had started as individual decisions to pursue creative careers had become a systematic demonstration of women's artistic capabilities and the cultural benefits that resulted when talent was properly supported and developed. The artistic community that had once been viewed with skepticism by conventional society had become a respected and influential force in international cultural development. The women who had thought they were simply following their creative dreams had actually established new possibilities for female achievement that would influence generations to come. The lessons of this period were about the power of community support, the importance of equal access to education and opportunity, and the cultural richness that emerges when talent is recognized and nurtured regardless of traditional social categories. The transformation was not just individual anymore. By late 1929, entire neighborhoods in Montparnasse had taken on a vibrant quality that longtime residents found deeply inspiring. The famous cafes that had become gathering places for serious artists now hosted animated discussions about technique, aesthetics, and the future of contemporary art. The energy that had made these streets legendary was being constantly renewed by talented women who had found their creative voices and were using them to contribute to ongoing cultural conversations. What's particularly inspiring about this period is how the artistic Renaissance created its own positive momentum within the creative community. Women who had once struggled to find buyers for their work now found themselves with waiting lists of collectors eager to acquire their latest pieces. Artistic talent, which had been undervalued for so long, was finally receiving the recognition and financial rewards it deserved. The galleries had become sophisticated in their understanding of contemporary art market. They knew exactly which artists were producing work of lasting significance and which emerging artists showed promise worth developing through long-term professional relationships. They developed support systems that helped artists maintain steady productivity while allowing them the creative freedom necessary for continued innovation. Some galleries began specializing in particular artistic movements, developing expertise in marketing specific types of work and building clienteles who appreciated those aesthetic approaches. This specialization created opportunities for artists to work with dealers who truly understood their creative vision and could connect them with collectors and critics who would appreciate their contributions to contemporary cultural development. The psychological development involved in these professional relationships was sophisticated and supportive. Gallery owners learned to present themselves as partners in their artists' creative development rather than merely commercial intermediaries. They would provide encouragement during difficult creative periods while maintaining professional standards that helped artists continue developing their skills and expanding their artistic vision. This collaborative approach was particularly effective because it addressed the creative needs of artists while also building sustainable business relationships that benefited everyone involved. Women artists found that working with supportive professionals actually enhanced their creativity rather than limiting it, as they could focus on their artistic development while their dealers handled the business aspects of their careers. The impact on creative output during this period reveals the positive relationship between professional support and artistic achievement. In the mature stages of their careers, many women experienced sustained periods of high productivity where their technical skills and creative vision combined to produce work of exceptional quality. Their art schools were more supportive than ever, and many women found that they could work with tremendous focus and sustained energy when they knew their efforts would be appreciated and professionally promoted. Colors seemed more vivid when artists were confident about their technical abilities. Ideas flowed more freely when creative work was supported by professional infrastructure that made artistic careers financially viable. For artists who had achieved recognition in their fields, professional creative work provided exactly the kind of intellectual challenge and emotional satisfaction that fueled continued innovation and personal fulfillment. The same neurological processes that made these women talented artists also made them capable of sustained creative development when their work was properly supported and recognized. The international art world had developed sophisticated appreciation for the contributions that women artists were making to contemporary cultural development. Collectors and museums around the world began actively seeking work by artists who had emerged from the Paris creative community, recognizing that important artistic innovations were happening there and wanting to acquire representative examples for their collections. This international recognition created market opportunities that extended far beyond the local Parisian art scene, giving artists access to collectors, critics, and cultural institutions throughout Europe and America. Gallery owners in major cities began developing expertise in contemporary women's art, understanding that this represented not just a fashionable trend, but a significant development in the evolution of modern artistic expression. Some critics began developing theoretical frameworks for understanding the unique contributions that women artists were making to contemporary aesthetic dialogue, treating their work as essential rather than supplementary to cultural development. This intellectual recognition meant that women's artistic achievements were being understood as innovations that advanced the entire field rather than merely as interesting examples of female creativity. The commercialization of artistic success created positive opportunities rather than exploitative situations, as the art market had learned to recognize and reward genuine excellence regardless of the artist's background. Women artists found that their gender was increasingly irrelevant to how their work was evaluated and promoted, as professional standards focused on artistic merit rather than biographical details. This development represented a fundamental shift in how the art world operated, moving towards systems that evaluated work based on its contribution to contemporary cultural dialogue, rather than on assumptions about who was capable of creating significant art. International recognition of the Paris artistic renaissance meant that news of these developments spread to cultural centers around the world, inspiring similar communities and opportunities in other major cities. American newspapers began running feature stories about the remarkable achievements of women artists working in Paris, emphasizing their professional success and artistic innovations rather than treating their careers as curiosities or social experiments. These articles were intended as inspiration and often had exactly that effect, encouraging young women in America and other countries to pursue their own artistic ambitions with greater confidence and determination. British cultural publications began featuring work by women artists as a regular part of their coverage of contemporary developments, treating female artistic achievement as newsworthy because of its quality rather than because of its novelty. The diplomatic implications of the Renaissance were entirely positive, as more foreign governments began celebrating their citizens who had achieved international recognition through their artistic work in Paris. The American embassy began maintaining records of citizens who had established successful artistic careers, using these achievements as examples of positive cultural exchange and American creative contributions to international artistic development. The British diplomatic officials reported similar success stories involving their nationals, viewing the artistic achievements of British women in Paris as evidence of their country's continuing cultural influence and creative vitality. International cultural relations were enhanced rather than strained by the movement of talented artists between countries, as governments recognized that artistic exchange contributed to positive diplomatic relationships and cultural understanding. The tourism industry found that Paris's reputation as a center of artistic innovation actually enhanced the city's appeal to visitors, who were attracted by the opportunity to witness important cultural developments and perhaps acquire work by emerging artists before they achieved wider recognition. Travel guides began including information about galleries and studios where visitors could observe contemporary artistic creation, presenting the creative districts as essential destinations for anyone interested in understanding modern cultural development. Hotel owners in Montparnasse and Montmartre reported that their association with the artistic community had become a significant marketing advantage, as guests specifically sought accommodations in areas where they might encounter working artists and witness the creative process firsthand. The restaurant and cafe industry found that establishments serving the artistic community had developed reputations for sophistication and cultural significance that attracted both local residents and international visitors. Business owners took pride in their role as gathering places for creative professionals and often developed expertise in contemporary art that enhanced their customers' experiences. This created a cultural tourism economy that benefited local businesses while providing artists with additional opportunities for recognition and sales to visitors who appreciated their work. The transportation industry found that the movement of successful artists and their work between cities had become a significant and growing market. Railways and steamship companies began developing specialized services for transporting artwork and providing comfortable travel for artists who were participating in exhibitions or establishing studios in different locations. Some transportation companies began offering packages specifically designed for art collectors and cultural tourists who wanted to visit multiple artistic centers and acquire work by contemporary artists. The epidemic's positive impact on the broader economy of the artistic districts was becoming increasingly apparent as businesses that served the creative community experienced sustained growth and increasing sophistication. Art supply stores reported steady increases in sales as more artists achieved financial success and could afford high-quality materials for their work. Galleries saw consistently strong attendance as public interest in contemporary art continued to grow and as the quality of available work attracted serious collectors and casual viewers alike. The real estate market in artistic neighborhoods began reflecting the area's enhanced reputation. As property values increased and the neighborhoods attracted residents who appreciated the cultural vitality and creative energy of these communities, landlords found that properties in artistic districts were increasingly desirable to tenants who valued the sophisticated cultural environment and the opportunity to participate in ongoing creative developments. Local residents who were not directly part of the artistic community often developed appreciation for the cultural contributions their neighborhoods were making to the broader life of the city. They took pride in living in areas that were recognized internationally as centers of artistic innovation and often became knowledgeable about contemporary art through their daily exposure to galleries, studios, and creative professionals. The Renaissance was creating positive economic and social synergies that benefited entire communities rather than just individual artists. As 1930 approached, the artistic Renaissance had fundamentally enriched not just individual lives, but entire neighborhoods, industries, and cultural institutions. What had begun as individual dreams of creative achievement had evolved into a demonstration of how communities thrive when talent is recognized, excellence is supported, and creative potential is allowed to develop fully. The women at the center of this Renaissance had become examples of successful creative independence, their achievements contributing to broader understanding of what becomes possible when social barriers are removed and when individual creativity is supported by community resources and professional opportunities. Their voices were increasingly prominent in cultural discussions, not just about women's capabilities, but about the conditions that allow any group of people to develop their talents and contribute meaningfully to society's creative and intellectual development. The artistic renaissance that had drawn so many talented women to Paris was continuing to flourish, supported by communities that valued excellence and sustained by economic and social systems that made creative careers not just possible, but professionally and financially rewarding. The story of these remarkable women stands as one of history's most inspiring examples of what happens when talent meets opportunity, when individual creativity is supported by community resources, and when society creates conditions that allow all its members to contribute their unique gifts to collective cultural development. These were not women who succeeded despite overwhelming obstacles, but women who demonstrated what becomes possible when artificial barriers are removed and when creative potential is allowed to develop in supportive, resource-rich environments. Their success created lasting changes in how society understood the relationship between gender and artistic capability, opening doors and creating opportunities that continue to benefit creative communities today. The legacy of the Paris artistic Renaissance extends far beyond the individual careers of the women who participated in it. Their collective achievement demonstrated that artistic excellence emerges from the interaction between individual talent and social support, between personal creativity and community resources, between individual dreams and collective commitment to nurturing human potential. The lessons of this period continue to influence how we think about creativity, community, and the conditions necessary for human talents to flourish fully and contribute meaningfully to our shared cultural heritage.